Hi, my name is MK Shu. This is my final presentation for the Fall 2022 MCM 519 Capstone Seminar, as instructed by Dr. Cecelia K. Hauser. The title of this capstone is Impacts of Social Media False Self-Presentations on Adolescents, and is dated December 11th, 2022. This presentation will begin with some background about how and why I selected this topic as the focus of my capstone research, the rationale behind its academic importance, and an overview of the project's theoretical framework and review of associated literature. We will then explore the catalysts for social media false self-presentation, how it manifests in social media usage, and the motivations that compel adolescents to embrace this approach. From there, we will move on to a summary of this capstone's key findings regarding potential positive and negative impacts, as well as best practices that act as buffers against those negatives, and then concluding with lessons learned about this topic, as well as my MCM experience as a whole. I have a love-hate relationship with social media. On the one hand, I enjoy the fact that my Instagram and TikTok connect me with a larger world, as both content consumer and creator. When I see my follower count increase and the likes and comments roll in, I get a warm, toasty feeling of accomplishment. However, on the other hand, I know the cold emptiness of a post that gets less attention than I expected. I can attest that phantom vibration syndrome is a real thing, having felt the notification buzz on my thigh, even though my phone is safely on its charger cable. I also loathe the medium's propensity for toxicity, misinformation, and above all, social comparisons. My wife on occasion will indicate to me her assumption that a Facebook acquaintance is living well thanks to a vacation post from France or Fiji or somewhere, or a video showing off their glorious McMansion. My response is often, you don't know what their actual financial situation is or might be. I'm also concerned that it will have a negative impact on her mood and feelings, creating jealousy or inadequacy, and a need to keep up with the Joneses, even though the reality may not align with what's presented in the news feeds. So it got me thinking. We're considering these dangers as adults with reasonably defined senses of self, with a relatively strong self-awareness. What kind of impacts could this have on a younger person who's not yet matured and developed these traits? Furthermore, children are growing up today with social media and mediated technologies as a way of life. As a father of two, increasingly savvy technical young children, I'm concerned about the potential impacts in terms of self-image on my kids as they get older and ultimately use more and more social media platforms in their daily lives. And so when it came time for my capstone final, I felt it was a great opportunity to use this very important work to explore this very personally and academically resonant topic. Social media platforms are becoming increasingly primary rather than secondary forms of communication, socialization, and collaboration. Technology is a foundational tool for education and connection, and as a result, aptitude in social media develops at increasingly earlier ages. An estimated 97% of all adolescents actively use a social media platform for self-expression and social belonging. The ubiquity, speed of transmission, and lack of validation requirements enable social media as an ideal medium for spreading misinformation. This facilitates the ability to develop alternate representations of the self, otherwise known as faces, or social media false self-presentations. Because adolescence is a critical time for human development, it is important to understand the impacts of technology on this specific demographic. There have been previous studies about social media false self-presentations, as well as the impacts of social media as a whole on adolescents, which we'll define here as youth ages 10 through 19. However, there is a relative lack of scholarly literature exploring these forces acting in tandem, and specifically with respect to the impacts of false self-presentations on adolescents. This capstone aims to help address that void by synthesizing and integrating existing research studies, sources, and analyses to investigate false social media self-presentations and their impacts on adolescents. In analyzing causative and effective relationships between social media and adolescents, and exploring the motivation behind young people's use of false self-presentations, this capstone will aim to integrate and apply several social and communication theories to this topical assessment. Goffman's work on face and face work is foundational, as it reasons why individuals need to present different self-presentations in different social situations, environments, and contexts. Gilor, Levy-Bells, and Terrell build on this with the concept of the Facebook self, a descriptor for false self-presentation on social media sites. This is corroborated by Munn and Kim and their work on false self-presentations, residing on the comparatively more modern platform of Instagram. Bam and Boyd build upon Goffman's facework ideas and apply them to modern mediated communication, noting need for variations in self to navigate the collapsed context unique to social media that blur the distinction between public and private space. This suggests presenting a self that is not directly true can be beneficial, particularly for marginalized or subjugated communities who may not have the ability to express their voices otherwise. Papacarisi and Cote and Pybus illustrate the power of affect, specifically as relates to one's sense of belonging and fear of missing out, as motivation for the production of unique content. This constant need to create and showcase novelty can lead to creation and curation of false self-presentations on social media. While publications specifically focusing on the impacts of social media false self-presentations on adolescents appear scarce, there are a number of pertinent sources addressing the scope more broadly. Daniels explores the impact of social media on self-esteem of individuals aged 10 through 17, noting the potential for both positive and negative impacts. Similarly, Kennedy investigated the impacts of social media on adolescent well-being, noting positive correlations between social media usage and building of relationships and self-expression, and negative correlations with self-esteem, mental health, and sleep levels. Schreier examined social media impacts on the identity development in adolescent females, notably speaking to the difficulties of balancing multiple selves, while Michikian conducted a study exploring the relationship between self-esteem and false self-presentation on Facebook, finding that young adults low in self-esteem and high in social anxiety increased levels of false self-presentation. Finally, Beauty highlighted what he characterized as the threat of social media usage among adolescents due to social media companies' prioritization of profit over user well-being, specifically the creation of unrealistic beauty standards. Goffman first described the need for the use and curation of faces, customized to specific social situations and contexts, and concealing one's true nature and feelings as appropriate. This is necessary because it is impractical or disadvantageous to express one's true feelings in many settings. For example, an individual would dress and act differently at their work, as opposed to a romantic date versus a night out with friends. Thus, there are many logical and constructive reasons for an individual to present themselves differently in different social situations and contexts. Social media is a highly visible network public space, whose high visibility, searchability, and retention leads to collapsed contexts where the distinctions between what is public and what is private is blurred. This highlights the need and advantage of a protective created social media self because of the inherent lack of privacy in that medium. Social media platforms provide unparalleled levels of profile creation and customization. There are seemingly limitless photo filters, virtual backgrounds, retouching, virtual makeup, even methods to visually alter the perception of one's gender or ethnicity. Users may be strategic in how they share content and present themselves. Presenting a false self online is much easier and safer than real life, thanks to simplicity of use, anonymity, and obscurity of body language and cues that would be associated with lying. Social media false self-presentation is now commonplace as an intentional strategy to increase sympathy, identification with and investment by others, and audience engagement. Social media networks use algorithmic models to encourage addictive behaviors, such as constant checking of one's updates and notifications. This drives the continuous contribution of immaterial labor to maintain pertinence, and creates a strong desire in adolescents to create novel, appealing personas and content in exchange for continued visibility and social currency. Key findings of this capstone include the following. Social media false self-presentation can be necessary and beneficial for adolescents in some situations. Conversely, social media false self-presentations can also have negative psychological impacts on adolescents. Online-offline balance and authenticity are important buffers against these potential negatives. Expressions of false selves can potentially empower adolescents, raising self-esteem and promoting body positivity. False self-presentation can be used defensively against stressful social experiences, such as rejection, negative evaluation by others, and humiliation. False social media selves facilitate the freedom to explore and develop identity and sense of autonomy, independent of authority figures. False selves can also be used by adolescents to gain pure acceptance, experiment with different emergent aspects of their personalities, such as gender identity, sexuality, spiritual or political beliefs. False selves can also help to allow for situationally appropriate self-presentation, facilitate privacy, and allow for online engagement without fear of reprisal, abuse, or harassment, particularly for adolescents who are members of marginalized or subjugated groups. However, consistent exposure to such false self-presentations can negatively impact development of healthy self-image in adolescents by rewarding misinformation and misrepresentation with online credibility and popularity. False social media self-presentations can create feelings of guilt and remorse in adolescents over perceptions of dishonest behavior and ethical violations. The labor involved in curating a false self can lead to anxiety and depression in adolescents. Incentivizing creation of unrealistic personas and environments can breed addiction and progressive feedback loops where there's social pressure to continue performing a character. Social comparison with progressively unrealistic images can lead to feelings in adolescence of inadequacy and eroding self-worth. Social media false self-presentation can create stigmas for the way one is presented. For example, being perceived as cheap if their presented image is perceived as overly sexualized. This behavior can also increase the risk of cyberbullying and harassment if falsehood is discovered by one's peers or followers. These potential impacts highlight the importance of buffers, specifically the encouragement of offline-online balance and authenticity. A healthy balance between online and offline social lives will help increase constructive, optimistic feelings from social comparison, rather than jealousy and envy. Those with stronger offline connections are less reliant on social media for connection and are thus less at risk for addiction. Positivity and authenticity is important, as those adolescents who present authentic selves have healthier, more honest, and longer relationships. Peer approval is a strong influence on adolescent self-esteem, so it would be beneficial to prune friends lists of those who do not provide social support, those who express negativity, and outright strangers. In conclusion, social media is increasingly vital to modern communication. It is thus important to understand both benefits and detriments of this medium, especially on impressionable youth. Adolescents, like adults, recognize the need to express different faces as appropriate for different situations. Social media can facilitate this social need, but there can be negative impacts. Awareness of such impacts and the ability to promote a balanced perspective can help parents, caregivers, and educators with the ability to encourage safe and healthy social media usage. It is important to promote a lifestyle that includes a balance between online and offline activity, and that reinforces authenticity and positivity as buffers against potential negative impacts. In writing this paper and preparing this presentation, I can attest to the benefits of examining popular contemporary topics through a theoretical and analytical lens. In the context of this presentation, I spoke of balancing offline and online lives as a best practice. As I reflect on this capstone and my graduate school experience as a whole, my key takeaway has been that a balanced perspective that takes into consideration all factual information without bias or prejudgment is likewise an optimal approach. And so, As my academic journey as an MCM student comes to a close with this culminating capstone project, I believe such a balanced outlook will be beneficial in my professional career, my personal life, and the communication style I use across both. With that, I'd like to take a moment here to acknowledge and express my appreciation of the program and gratitude to Dr. Hauser, Dr. Duell, and all my classmates and instructors over the course of this program who have made this such a rich, collaborative learning experience. Special thanks to Dr. Kohler, whose social media class was the initial inspiration for this topic, and to my wife and kids, who are my ongoing inspiration in all things. Thank you for viewing this presentation and for your kind attention.